So once you get an Echo Robotics robot, don't try to make your own account anywhere, as we won't be able to link you to your robot. Whoever you're working with will sign you up for an account that will give you access to the MyRobot portal as well as the app. Shortly after that, you'll receive an email, which might end up in your spam or junk folder. Right now, it appears that all the major email providers like Gmail and Yahoo are good at identifying that this isn't a junk email, but if your company has their own email domain, that is the name after the @ symbol, something may stop it before it even gets to your junk folder. In that case, if you have a personal email with one of the larger providers, you may want to use that to sign up. Everything regarding who can see or control what things is just defined on the portal per account, so it doesn't really matter what it is as long as you can receive emails there. Right here, we have the email from the portal, and it'll give you a link right here to go make your account. So we'll click that. So right here, it's asking us to make a password. We'll hit send. So once you submit that, this will come up right here. You just click here. I have read and agree with these terms. Approve. Welcome to Echo Robotics. This will give you the links to both the Android and iOS apps, which have the same basic functionality as the web portal, but are laid out a little different. This video is only going to be about the web portal. So we'll hit OK right here. And whenever you want to return to the web portal, simply type myrobot.echorobotics.com. And we'll go in now, and you can see all the robots here on the left that are part of the entity that this user is within. I'll explain the entities in just a second. You will only see the robots that you have that are already installed and active. There's a definition for installed for a robot, which is pretty much that it's been able to do a full work cycle autonomously. So it hasn't been interrupted, and it's not been, set to work like from the middle of the field or something. It has to leave from the station, come back to the station and charge. Every 6 hours, the portal goes through all the robots, and it checks to see which robots do meet that criteria, and then it'll switch it from an uninstalled robot to an installed robot. So on the left here, normally you won't see the uninstalled robots, and if you want to, you go right up here and you click this, and you go down to not installed, and it'll show you the robots that either have never been on or have been on as demos or something like that. If you have fewer than 5 robots in your entity, it'll actually show all of them on this page, including the not installed ones. So that's the difference, basically, whether or not you meet that threshold of 5. So this is the page that you would normally click on a robot and be able to interact with it, send it commands and so forth. But before I show you that, I want to show you some of the other sections of the website that are all up here. So if you click this at the very top, you'll get a list of some different sections you can go to. This is sort of the highest level menu of all the menus. The bottom 2 items on this menu here are not really all that important. The documentation tab just lists to a few manuals and things, although we have newer manuals, up-to-date things that include more recent features, all on the Echo Robotics dealer portal. If you go to the service reports, if you've been doing service work and submitting service reports through the robot, those would be here. This is only visible to technicians, and there's not really a lot of cases where you would be using this. The next tab up is actually very important. This is the Entities Management tab. So before I show you how to make an entity, let me first show you how the entity system works. It's basically a hierarchy. The entities themselves, if it's not turned into a user or a robot, just a pure entity, is sort of this abstract concept that we would use either for a subgroup of robots or for a dealer or a customer, and it allows you to organize all of the robots and users. So in this case, we have an entity here at the very top called City Authority. So that would be the entity by itself. And within that entity, there are 2 items, which are still also kind of entities in themselves. They're just not an entity that can have these other entities built off of it. So the City Authority entity has user A and this robot. So that would be a specific robot. They've created 4 sub-entities: Sports Field 1, Sports Field 2, Park West, and Park East. And then either Park West or City Authority made a sub-entity under Park West called Golf Course. So each of these also has different users and different robots in it. So this would be some sort of organization. And the reason that it's set up this way and you don't just have one giant pot of all of the robots and users is so you can restrict who has access to what. In this case, user A has access to all of the users on this page and can change their roles, delete their accounts, or create new accounts within any of those sub-entities. Any of the users in this entity cannot see this robot or that user. They can only see the one that's in their entity or lower. So an example of that would be this Park West entity. User E can see the robot in Park West with them, the entity golf course under them, and the user F and robot in golf course. They can't see anything else on this page, the city authority stuff above them or the other entities that are at their level. So in that way, you can restrict who has access to what, which is not only a good way to actually restrict access, but also just for organization, so you can stay sane knowing where all of these robots are and who can control them. So if we go back to the Entities tab, we can see that we're inside the entity Turf Planet Express. So this at the top here is sort of like the tree structure. You'll see as you go further into entities, you'll see them added up here. I'll show you that in just a second. But we can see that we are the entity Turf Planet Express. And what we want to do is within that entity up here, we want to create a new entity. So this is how you would set up a new customer. So you go over here to the button that says Create Entity, and then it says Add Entity to the entity Turf Planet Express, which is what we want to do. We want the customer to be a sub-entity of the dealer's entity. So when you create the user entity, which would be the customer's account or the robots for that, you would want to put those inside of the entity that we're making right now. If you put them in the dealer entity, then they can see and have access to all your robots, which you don't want to do. So when you're creating an entity, which in this case we'll just say this is the company of the customer, it says last name here, but that's just basically the name of the entity. So let's call that Panucci's Pizza. You can add a description here. They can see it, so just put something non-incriminating. Below that, it says street and number. So this number is not your phone number. This number is meant to indicate the street number that you're on. So let's say this company is at, and we save that. So it says entity successfully created. It's listed here in the different things that are within the Turf Planet Express. So when you're in Turf Planet Express, you'll see everything that's under that, and under those things, just basically everything all the way down. So right now at this point, we can't create the user here because they'll have access to all the dealer robots. We have to go into Panucci's Pizza right here. And then you'll see at the top here, we are now one below that. We're in Panucci's Pizza. They'll only be able to see theirs and lower, so theirs won't even say Turf Planet Express here. It'll just say Panucci's Pizza, and then they could make, if they needed to, sub-entities below that. Now that we're inside of that entity, and the way you know you're in it is this thing at the top here. This entity has no robots and no users in it, so we're going to create a user first. Click Create User. Now, if you'll notice, I just filled these out, and this little submit button that has the disk icon is still dimmed out, so you can't submit this. And there's two reasons for this. One of them is that you do have to fill out all the fields, including this title field, so you can just click something there. It still has an undimmed, and then the way you get it to kind of recognize that you filled this out is just to hit Tab to go through all the fields, and it'll highlight right there, and we can submit it. Okay, so now we've created that user, and we don't see them anymore because we're not looking for users. Right here we have 3 tabs. One of them is for entities, one's robots, and one's users. So we're in Panucci's Pizza right now, so we're that entity, and we can see there is one user within this entity. So if we click that, we see that he's right here. So we have the user in the correct entity, and we have the entity. Now we have to give them one of the robots. So we're going to back out to Turf Planet Express, where you have your robots. And we're going to click robots. So now you can see users. There are 2 users in here. And if we click robots, we can see all of our dealer robots. So let's give them this robot named Mobius Strip. So if you click that robot, it'll pull it up and some information about it. And then if you want to move it, you go up to here to change parent entity. You click that. And then it'll let you search for an entity using keywords. Or if you only have a few entities underneath you, it'll actually just show you some suggestions. So if you click Panucci's Pizza right here, we've moved the robot, but we haven't saved it yet, so you actually have to go up here. So this is the cancel and save for if you've moved the entity. So we do want to save it, so it'll then go underneath that entity. So if we go into the entity Panucci's Pizza, we see that they have 1 robot and they have 1 user, which is exactly what we want. So that's the basic idea of how you use this. Again, it's just the hierarchy that shows what is connected to what and what is above or below other things. There's one small quirk with the search bar for entities management, and none of the other search bars on the website work like this. It's just this one. But you can see here there's 1 asterisk in the search bar by default. Now, what that means is to show everything. So if we're in the entity Turf Planet Express, that means to show all the entities, robots, users, everything from Turf Planet Express down. So for example, let's say I want to look at the account of somebody who's within the Panucci's Pizza entity, and I search for Panucci. It comes up with that entity. I can click the entity to go into it. And you can see right now that I have the one entity, which is Panucci's Pizza, and I have their one robot. But for some reason I have no users, even though I know there is at least one account within this entity. Now, what's happened is that I've done a search within the entity Panucci's Pizza for anything that has the word Panucci in it. So in this case, the entity is named that itself, so it shows up in the search. And they actually ended up renaming their robot from Mobius Strip to Panucci, which I didn't know about. But none of the users have the word Panucci in their account, so it doesn't show up in the search. If I want to see everything within the Panucci's Pizza entity, I have to put an asterisk in the search bar. And now you can see that I have the one entity, the one robot, and the one user that are all within the entity Panucci's Pizza. Basically, if you're ever getting confusing results from an entities management search, remember that you might have to put an asterisk in the search if you mean to search for everything. You can also see that if we take out the asterisk and search for nothing, we get nothing. One other feature in the entities management search is this checkbox that says in the selected entity only. So if we do a normal search, this will show us all the robots that are within the Turf Planet Express entity and within any entity that is lower than Turf Planet Express. For example, you can see the Panucci's Pizza robot here alongside all of our inventory robots and all of our active robots. If we select the checkbox, it just shows all of the robots that are within the entity Turf Planet Express and not any sub-entity. The last thing that I'm going to show in the entities management section are the roles you can assign a user. So while you're editing a user, you can assign them any of 3 roles, which are sort of separate sets of privileges. You can't edit your own roles, and you can only give a user a role that you yourself have, meaning if you don't give one role to a customer, they can't assign that role to any users they create. Entities Administrator means that you have the ability to create new users or new sub-entities. Robot Control means that you can send commands and configurations to the robots. And Technician gives you access to a few extra pages of technical information on the website, like the activity list page. And that's about it for the Entities Management section.